Hey there, and welcome. So, Side Effects is holding a new Houdini art challenge called Mardini, which is starting on the 1st of March. The idea of it is to create an artwork in Houdini based on a daily prompt. That prompt is basically just a theme to base your artwork around. It's open to anyone who would like to enter, and if you do enter, it doesn't have to be every day. Last year, there were prizes for Best Daily, Best Weekly, Best Collection, Best Overall Artwork, and for entering every day. So, as you may know, I won Best Collection in last year's Who Lie Art Challenge, and I've decided to do a daily review video for each day's entries. I'm going to be talking about the winning entries, what makes them so good, and then I'm also going to be talking about some of the other entries. I'll go over what I like about them, what I think could maybe be changed, and how they could have been winning entries in my opinion. So if you'd like me to review your entry, feel free to tag me on Instagram at 9_between. So with all of that comes a bit of a disclaimer. Everything that I'm saying here is my own opinion. It doesn't make it right or wrong. I'm just trying to give a critique that the artist can work from and hopefully something that you can learn from as well. I'm not trying to make fun of or insult or belittle any of the artists. I'm merely just trying to give some feedback in an entertaining way. So let's get straight into it. In third place in the images category, we have this entry by Takuya Okada for day 14 Ancient. And so, the first thing that I notice is the great use of Houdini's base geometry. We have Crag over here, I believe he's called as the main focal point. We also have Tommy over here, and he's been given a fedora. So, a couple of things about this shot. The level of detail in the walls and the pillars is excellent. They've gone for very basic geometry, and really just relied on texturing to add a lot of the detail. They've got lots of elements that add to the shot and make the environment feel more fleshed out. These do feel like ruins, so they've got the idea of their environment across. Now, the most important thing about the shot is probably the lighting. So they have this light coming from above, and it is a volumetric light. You can see that it catches on the volumetrics in the atmosphere and sort of gives this blue tint and thickness to the air. They have the light coming from above, which hits the top of this character, and you'll notice this a lot in film. If you have something that's sort of monumental and they want to bring attention to it, they'll have a light from above, especially when it's in this pose where it's pointed downwards and it's in sort of a defeated pose, then they'll go for this lighting quite often. But an interesting touch that Takuya Okada added was the underlighting. So this underglow over here with the orange, it adds a little bit more interest to the shot and pairs nicely with the blue tint in the volumetric lighting. So I also think that it's a nice touch having Tommy sort of silhouetted out. And this is important because he's not here as a focal point. He's here to sort of add to the story and to give an idea of scale. So it might be difficult if he wasn't here to get an idea of scale, but this lets you know that this is gargantuan, right? It's a very large monument. So yeah, I think everything about this looks great. The only thing I might suggest is darkening of certain areas, such as around the abdomen, in the background over there, anywhere that falls outside of this volumetric light. Just things like that might help increase the contrast of the shot and really help the image just a bit. But I do think that this is awesome. So yeah, great stuff from Takuya Okada. In second place, we have this entry by Illusion. And this is a beautiful shot, really. These light rays coming through the tree add so much to the shot. And I'm interested to know how they did this, because you don't often see such definite streaks with volumetric lighting. And so they did a great job of making that an important element. It really feels, you know, like an early misty morning type of thing. There's a fantasy element to this. Oftentimes what you'll notice is that when trees are done, especially in a hurry, there's a lack of detail. There may be not enough leaves, there may be not enough branches. Perhaps the trunk doesn't have enough detail, or there's not enough structural variation. And in this case, none of that's an issue. They've nailed this. So everything about this tree looks good. There are some areas where the texture looks a little bit stretched or a little bit off, but that's not a big deal. I do think that it's awesome. So they've also done a great job with setting the scene. They have a very filled out environment. You can see the sky in the background and the cloud, as well as these other trees in the background over here. They've left enough empty space on the right over here to make the shot not feel closed off. The shot does feel very open, because you might feel somewhat closed off if this tree was centered and there weren't enough space on the sides. They've also got this great aerial perspective, so you can see this over here. It's the sort of fog in the air. Everything about this looks beautiful. Love this entry. So well done to Illusion. And in first place, we have this entry by Clamo. Now, first and foremost, the thing that I notice is the variation. There's not a single element that I can see that has been repeated or reused. They don't make it obvious in any way. Each of these rocks feel independent and unique, and all of the pebbles and stones that make up the ground feel unique as well. They have these shrubs and things, small patches of grass, even that has variation to it. They have this background, and I can't tell if this is an image. It looks like geometry to me, and if it is, that's extremely detailed geometry, so I assume that they drove this by a texture. The background has good detail, everything has great detail. Then, as for the actual composition, they've given shallow depth of field and a foreground. This is important if you want your environment to feel more fleshed out. You generally want a separated foreground, middle ground, and background. That's exactly what they have. As for drawing your attention to the focal point, they have everything out of focus and everything darkened except this area leading up to the sword. So they have these stairs leading up here. This sort of guides your eye in this direction. But that's not the only thing, because their lighting is drawing attention to the sword as well. If you remove this light, I don't think that this entry is nearly as successful, because this light is extremely important in bringing the attention to the sword. It makes it feel important. And so everything about the shot is extremely well done, from the conceptual aspect of it to the actual artistic aspect of it. And then, of course, finally, it's just aesthetically pleasing. It's a nice image to look at. Yeah, awesome entry from Clamo. Really love this one. In third place in the animation category, we have this entry by VFX Man 222. And they've gone for this close-up shot of what may be an artifact of some sort. Now, the important thing when doing a shot like this is to ensure that you have things like good camera movement, good lighting, and good rendering techniques. They have all of those things. They have shallow depth of field over here to narrow the focus. Your focus is drawn to wherever the camera is centered on. They also have a very subtle camera move that sort of allows the light to play on the geometry. As we move, all of this light moves around over here. It adds a level of detail that you don't get from a still. Finally, they bring their camera move to the center point, and you can get to focus on the focal point of the image. So this is a nice touch. They've also reused geometry, which I always recommend because it saves you a lot of time. So as you can see, every one of these porcelain feathers in the top row, they're all the same, right? It's the same piece of geometry reused. In the second row, it looks like the same geometry, but they've changed the color. In the final row, they've done the same thing, but there's no green on the tips. So what they've done is they've reused the same geometry everywhere, but they've added variation. And that's extremely important for faking detail. So they did a great job at that. The only thing that I might recommend is working on the sort of gold texture over here. If this is intended to be metallic gold, then I would recommend reducing the saturation on this and maybe playing around a bit with metallics. This does just look like it's painted, but maybe that is the idea. So if the idea of this is to look like a painted ceramic, then great. But if the idea is for this to look like gold, I think it could do with some tweaking. Once again, that's just a very minor nitpick. I think that this looks good. It's a wonderful shot and is reminiscent of a jewelry ad. So I like this a lot. I think it's cool. In second place, we have this entry by Beazle. And this is a very whimsical entry. They've gone for an almost stop motion approach. This looks like it's maybe 12 frames per second or something. And they've got these little tribal characters, but these characters are, extremely simplified. They look like spoons or something. And they're busy dancing around the fire. Even though the characters are extremely basic, it doesn't look amateurish because there's all of these great elements like this that's out of focus in the foreground, the detail on the ground coverage, the sort of attention to detail by adding displacement or bump to these huts. Things like lighting contrast, so they have the blue light over there with the orange light up front. All of those things signal somebody who knows what they're doing. And when you combine styles like that, it results in a very unique entry because you have a very whimsical sort of focal point, but you've really fleshed it out. There's even trees and things in the background. The shadows being cast are great. In fact, the background looks amazing. And then they have these little characters busy dancing around. So I think that this is awesome. It's fun to see something different like this, where they have great rendering mixed in with the sort of stop motion feel. So yeah, love this entry by Beazle. And in first place, we have this entry by Thomas Christensen. And I think that this is so cool. So crowd simulation is something that I don't really do very much. So I appreciate some good crowd sim every now and then. As you can see, they've got great animation and variation in the movement of all of these mummy characters. Their environment looks good. So they've got sort of textured walls and everything. Of course, it is quite low poly and there is some texture stretching. There's these very sharp edges that look a bit unrealistic, but that's not really important because your focus is here. And everything in this area looks great. They also have a nice variation with the light being cast over here. So it catches onto some of them at the back over there, and then they come towards the camera. And this is great. So another thing that is interesting about this that I think people should take note of is the slight camera pan out, right? The camera is moving this way, right? It's coming towards us, but it's moving slower than these mummies. And that actually adds a lot to the shot because it feels like they're closing in on you, right? Like they're getting closer. And so that's a nice touch. But yeah, everything about this is great. There's good variation. I can't really see any repetition or anything. They do feel very real, right? These characters feel very well done. So I love this entry from Thomas Christensen. I appreciate that they've gone for something slightly different. I think that it's a very memorable entry. So yeah, awesome stuff. So I've kind of run out of memes for starting these. So I'm going to need to find a new meme, but I'll still give my like. That's entry from Jonathan Formosa. That's a lot of detail. I mean, it does all come from textures, but it's still nice. Like, that is still a lot of detail. One thing that I might suggest about this, actually it's tricky because of the structure. So what I was going to say is you kind of want a darker background, right? So you want this area to be darker, or at least that's what I want. I don't know what you want. This light over here is extremely bright, but it's not bad. Like, you can keep this. I think that the issue is that there's a very muted light on what should be the focal point. So I think what could maybe be done is like a hole in the top over here, sort of break in the structure, and just have some light pouring in over here, and then do some volumetrics so this area seems dusty. And then you can maybe even sort of lessen the light that's being hit over here and narrow it in so it only hits maybe this edge over here. That's just my thoughts. I think that could be cool. So change the lighting where there's more interest, because it's kind of just very bright and then muted. And so your focal point is actually sort of here, kinda. And if it's not there, then it's here, but there's nothing really to focus on here. So I definitely think that some light from the top could fix that. But yeah, I think that this is very nicely textured. I think lighting was the problem child of this entry. All hail Bigfoot. Is that a plane over there? Is that oh, it's an HDRI? I don't know. Actually, lighting's nice. I actually want this HDRI. Cool foot. Ah, interesting. This is very good. I'd say that in terms of texturing and geometry. Geometry is brilliant. Texturing is brilliant. Don't see stretch textures. There's good variation. There's nice displacement. I think the issue here is that the foreground and the background blend into each other too much. This goes back to my sort of lighting technique stuff, where I still maintain that you should have some sort of edge light, especially when you only have a single focal point like this. So a light that sort of just hits here. Generally darken the shot a bit more so that you have like less light over there. Alternatively, vary the color of your lights. So have a slightly blue cooler light coming in from this side, then maybe like an oranger light coming from the bottom, sort of like an underglow. But then the main issue I still think is just the background. I think it's too close to the foreground colors. So when you look at this, it's all just sort of mashed into each other and you don't really get the full idea of what's in focus. So yeah, I think the actual geometry is great, but you need to cause more contrast with lighting. Lighting contrast is extremely important. Like this over here looks good, right? Because the lighting sort of plays on this edge and then the darkness plays on the back edges. But that doesn't really carry through to the rest of it, right? Like, I think that there should be more darkness on this side, color variation, all sorts of things with the lighting. But this geometry does look excellent. So yeah, I think, yeah, geometry, I think 9.3 out of 10. And lighting, not 9.3 out of 10. Waiting so long for this pig to load. What resolution is this? This must be massive. 10 megs. Dude, this is like 8K. Okay, I'll go in and appreciate the detail. That's a high-res Sphinx. This actually looks good though. This is excellent sort of lighting and things. Nice blue lighting over here. That sort of blue diffuse ambient lighting that I'm always talking about. Much brighter, yellower or warmer light on this side. Also hits the pyramid very nicely, right? That sharp edge looks excellent. This is always tricky though, because I think the issue or the thing that's kind of missing with this is minor detail independent of the focal points. So I think that you'd probably need like some rocks and some things collecting over here. Maybe like, I don't even know, it's so tricky because deserts are kind of like this. They're very uniform, but that's also the issue with the shot. But otherwise, composition's cool. I like that it's sort of split like that. You know, you can sort of see how the composition is made up. Once again, a sort of rule of thirds type thing. Nice entry. Yeah, I think, who is this? Zen Shep. Yeah, Zen Shep with the 12K Sphinx pig. Cool. This is smart. I like this. I can't believe that this was actually in my lifetime that this was used.
Okay, boomer.
Kids these days don't know what the save icon is. In like Microsoft Word, it's this thing. It's a floppy disk. People won't know that. They'll be like, what is this weird icon? Why is it that? I wonder if people are going to come up with a new save logo. That would be interesting. I wonder what it would be now. But yeah, this entry from Carl Kraus. Very interesting lighting and things. Love this. Looks really good. I remember Daniel God saying something about he's trying more like dramatic lighting or something. I think I saw on Instagram he said that. And he's almost got this like really good. I'm always hesitant to question his rendering because he is really good. I think what it's lacking is a sort of edge light, you know, hitting these edges over here. Maybe a bit of a variation in color of lighting, although he does have it in the background. It's a blue background and he's got this bit of orange over here in the background. But this is very close to being a winning entry. Like there's very good detail, composition looks good, background looks good, dust flecks in the atmosphere. All of that's very nice, good edge detail. I think lighting, yeah, lighting is probably a couple of things to just really light up the shapes. Even maybe a bright light on the back over there to hit those edges. I think that would be sick. Yeah, you could even get kind of artistic with it. Have like a reddish hued light coming in from this side. That sort of diffuse red light. And then a cooler light coming in from this side. That's just an idea. But I definitely think edge lighting is the key factor in this one. I mean, like always, awesome work from Daniel Gods. I want to mention this one from Hertz because it's close to being very good. The issue is just that it's very tricky. This is one of those situations where it takes a lot to get this looking very good. Like to actually go about getting this to look good. Like this first opening, I'd say this shot probably looks best. Mostly because of composition. This is something you'll see very often. Heavily concentrated geometry towards the first third of the shot. Very light concentration on the third, but focus on lighting in the third sort of, the third third of the shot. You have sort of lighting variation and that adds the interest. But yeah, I think that's nice. Like this shot looks good. The issue comes in here. When it's flat, you know, it's sort of face on, and then it's this extended shot. It just doesn't mesh as well with the other shots. So I think maybe something like angling it and keeping it up close, and then once again you're gonna have to do the close in camera like pan up to sort of follow this growth, and then once again sort of show what you showed in the first part. Like this is tricky. It was executed well, like your geometry and the concept and everything's cool, but it is very tricky to get this rendering looking good. But yeah, I still think that it's cool from Hertz. Drasko Ivashik, I think. This one's cool, man. I like this one. This one's really sick. I don't actually know how you did this. Like, you're not actually getting this off of rotation, right? Are you? If you are, that's pretty insane. I think that's one of the most interesting shots that he's done. Yeah, if this was maybe just like a bit more fleshed out in that the pottery looks a bit better, it doesn't just look like this sort of gel, then I think this is the special mention entry, because everything about this looks good. Maybe one thing is I'd increase the intensity on one of the lights, just so that you have more of a stronger, just any of the lights, just so that you have a stronger focus on any of the edges. So you can make this one a bit harsher, maybe make this one a bit harsher. Either one is fine. But I do think that this is awesome. And of course, the music's always good. I think he makes it himself. So, you know, kudos for that. So Milan B saying that this took long to render. Yeah, so you're going to have an issue if you're going to be using volumetrics. I think in the tips video, I did mention something about that. Also with grains. So you sort of treat grains to I guess in a similar way to how you would treat volumetrics, in that it also has to do a lot of light bounces, right? Light comes in, has to hit, you know, a particle, bounces between the particles, and it does that everywhere, right? So you have sort of reflections of particles on particles, and there's sort of lots of surfaces. You know, this sort of thing is the equivalent of a much bigger surface area. So there's more lighting calculations being sort of focused in. I don't know what what am I even drawing? Yeah, so it's risky doing something like this. I think that's the only feedback I can give for this one, because I don't think that you fully realized probably the vision that you had for this. But it's just that volumetrics and grains are two things that are pretty heavy on render time. So I think do be careful about that. If you are going to do grains, do less grains, and do them maybe not as the focal point, more as like a filler kind of thing. These donkeys never get old. I want this, and I want Pink Blob as YouTube miniseries. I would watch that. My standards aren't particularly high. I'll watch donkeys and I'll watch pink blobs. This entry, very nice simulation. It's just lit down in a few places. One major problem with this is the very uniform lighting. I do see that you do have some displacement, so that's nice, I think. It would be nice to have maybe more displacement on areas like that. But I don't think that's the issue. This does look fairly good. I think this needs to be darker, right? This side. And yeah, I'm noticing a lot of like lighting things in these entries. This is a very uniform light that you have. As you can see, like the light here is pretty much the same as the light here. And that's generally not good where you have lighting that's the same across an object. So I think you panel it, right? Maybe this bright light over here is fine, but then this sort of is the diffuse area, which is, you know, okay. But then this area is maybe darker. That makes it a bit more interesting. And then, you know, by the time that the coins come out, it's a lot more interesting. So because the coins are so bright and vibrant, right, you maybe want to avoid having all of the focus drawn to this pot. And because this pot is so light, you're having that issue. So two things I would suggest is darken the pot to maybe like, maybe closer to like mahogany. Maybe that's not the best color, but just something a bit darker so that there's good contrast between the pot and the coins. And then the other thing obviously is the lighting being too uniform. Because these are catching the lighting so nicely, you don't really need so much lighting on the pot. And it sort of takes away from the effect. So yeah, I definitely think that. The other thing is RBD fracturing. You can see that it's fractured before it breaks. So if that was your intention, cool, no problem. But if it wasn't, then I think do the RBD, what is it called? RBD connected faces and disconnected faces. You can see that in the stone video that I did at the end, where I'm busy going through my setup. I explain how I keep the egg together until it actually is meant to break apart. So that's something you could do. And then finally, I think the last part is just a bit of edge detail on this part. Right, it's very sharp, but it's not a big deal. I think some chipping and edge detail would be nice. But yeah, I think that this simulation's awesome. Shot has incredible potential. I think it was slightly lit down by lighting. You can even see like inside, it's very well lit. I don't think that that's necessarily the best way to do it. But yeah, by no means is it a bad shot. I think just a few minor tweaks and it'll be awesome. If I could give one tip about this, and okay, look, it's a bit of a questionable tip, so just bear with me. Because I do like pretty much everything about this, right? Lighting, texturing, all of that looks cool. Even the spread of this doesn't look bad. What I would say is that it definitely needs volumetrics to make these particles feel more full. That's always the issue with particles alone, is that they feel very sparse and empty. You have to have a lot of particles for them to feel full. So the good workaround is to use volumetrics for it. That's just like one thing that you might want to do. But look, I know in a daily challenge, volumetrics aren't your friend. So that's just a tip. If this wasn't a daily challenge, that's kind of what I would say. That does need some volumetrics to feel a bit more full. But yeah, cool setup. .simulate. So this one from Tanita is conceptually great. Even the art style is awesome. Love the art style. But I think it's very easy to miss what the idea was here. And it's because this middle section happens too quickly, and it might be like a render time thing that you didn't have enough time to render out more. But it would have been nice if the sort of day and night cycle was a bit more fluid as opposed to sort of like flashing, because you don't really get the idea across. But I think that it's an awesome concept. Like, you're maybe not getting enough credit for the concept here, because I do see like there's wear on this. It looks awesome. It's sort of these plants dying. You could even have it so that these plants just turn brown and like flop over or something, or get thinner over time instead of just disappearing. But yeah, like, I think the issue is just that this is too short to appreciate what's going on. So I would say, you know, over maybe 0.5 of a second at a time, you know, have each cycle. So yeah, so that where it's all happening in like 1 second flat, I would say spread that over like 4 seconds or 5 seconds, and then do a nice little sort of gradient where the light turns to blue. So it sort of goes from like this yellowish light to a more blue sort of nighttime lighting, back to the yellowish light. And you just sort of rotate that, and then yeah, have this sort of breaking down. But I think that it's such a cool concept, and your art style is awesome. The composition is awesome. Even the simulation at the end looks good. Yeah, I really love this entry. I just wish it had more time to, you know, sort of fully come to fruition. So that is all for today's video. I will be back tomorrow. I'm still trying to catch up. I'm already on day 14 now. I think it's already like, what is it? It's day like 19 or something when I'm actually recording this. This is bad. So yeah, I think I'll try and speed it up a bit. I do want to give some more tutorials towards the end of these, but maybe I'll do that when I've caught up a bit. So anyways, thanks for watching again. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope you found it fun, entertaining, educational, all the good stuff. And I will see you tomorrow. Bye.